you want to look at going into a growing industry or rising tide, right? There are just a reality that there are some businesses and things that are dying, and there are some brands that are dying. That's a market where you have 10,000 people turning 65 a day. The stats are crazy. By 2030, 1 in 5 US residents will be over the age of 65. And 70% of people who are 65 or older will require long term care. That's fascinating. So number one, so today we're not going to talk about specific franchise names and brands. We do that all the time every week, right? And so you're some people will still watch. These are the elements that you want to look for. So this is more of the, instead of giving a man a fish, you feed him for a day. I'm teaching you how to fish here. Teaching you how to fish. That's the analogy that we're running towards here. So you want to find a business that's in a growing industry and there's a rising tide, right? So the analogy here is this was have you ever heard the phrase a rising tide lifts all boats? Let me know if you've heard that phrase before. A rising tide lifts all boats. It was coined by JFK, and it basically meant to say that in a great, strong performing economy, anyone that was involved and participating in the economy overall was going to benefit, right? So if you're in a booming economic time, whether you buy a house, you invest in the stock market, like everything is increasing. Okay, we got a bunch of people have heard of that phrase. So when it comes to like what are the best kinds of franchises to buy, you want to look at going into a growing industry or rising tide, right? There are just a reality that there are some businesses and things that are dying, and there are some brands that are dying, right? Like as an example, the movie rental business, Blockbuster, was not a rising tide. Like that was a declining tide. And so sometimes that happens with innovation, right? And so what has worked with the franchise before isn't necessarily what's going to work today. Does that make sense? All right, so rising tide. So think about this for a second. In 2000, 2004, 2005, before the economic crash, real estate boomed, right? So you could buy, it didn't matter if you closed your eyes, threw a dart at a board full of houses for sale. If you bought a house in 2004, 2 years later, that house was going to be worth more money. Like pretty much didn't matter where you bought it because the housing market was just increasing and going up, right? So an example of this could be something like senior care or something involving seniors because that's a market where you have 10,000 people turning 65 a day. The stats are crazy. By 2030, 1 in 5 US residents will be over the age of 65. And 70% of people who are 65 or older will require long term care. That's fascinating. That is really, really interesting. And once people reach the age of 65, their life expectancy is an additional 20 years. So as an example, there are franchises that, they install ramps in people's homes. And there's ones that for like hearing aids. And it's not just all care. And this is just one small example. I'm not telling you to go buy a senior care business because it's not just about going into a rising tide. It's got to align with your skill sets. The profit potential's got to be there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But rising tide is important, right? So I want you to just think about, hey, what's an industry that's growing? What's an industry that's expanding? If you enjoyed this short clip from the podcast, you can check out another short clip right here. Or if you want to watch the full episode of this podcast, you can watch that here. And remember, knowledge is not power. It's applied knowledge that's power. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.